What if your best-selling product was about to be hit with a hidden tax so complex it could literally put you out of business? For thousands of small companies around the world, this isn't just a bad dream. The European Union's new carbon border tax was created with a noble goal: to fight climate change. But for small exporters, it's quickly becoming a bureaucratic nightmare. This regulation, called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, was supposed to level the playing field. Instead, it's creating a maze of paperwork, hidden costs, and strategic traps that could knock small players right out of the European market. In this video, we're revealing the 7 surprising ways this new law is hammering small businesses, and the first one will change how you choose your suppliers forever. The Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM for short, is the EU's big plan to put a price on carbon-heavy goods coming into its market. It's targeting products like iron, steel, aluminum, cement, fertilizers, and hydrogen. The idea sounds simple enough. If a product is made in a country with lax climate policies, the EU importer has to buy CBAM certificates to cover the carbon emissions from its production. This is supposed to stop carbon leakage, where European companies just move their factories to places with weaker environmental rules to save a buck. On paper, it sounds fair. But in reality, it's a mess of unintended consequences, especially for small and medium-sized businesses. While giant corporations might see CBAM as an opportunity, smaller companies in developing nations are facing a much harsher truth. They don't have the cash, the tech, or the leverage to adapt easily. So, while the headlines talk about climate justice, we're going to show you the 7 surprising challenges your business needs to brace for right now. These are the issues nobody's talking about, but they could have the biggest impact on your bottom line. 1. The data black hole. You're now on the hook for your supplier's carbon footprint. The first, and maybe the most shocking, challenge is who's responsible for the data. Under CBAM, it's not enough to know what you're exporting. You now need to know the exact carbon emissions baked into your products. That means you are suddenly responsible for digging up detailed data from your entire supply chain. Think about that for a second. If you're a small manufacturer of metal parts, you don't just need to track your own factory's energy use. You need precise data from the steel mill that sold you the raw materials. You need to know their production methods, their energy sources, and their specific emissions per ton of steel. Many small exporters have worked with their suppliers for years, but they've never had to play carbon detective before. And here's the kicker. A massive number of suppliers, especially the smaller ones, simply don't have this data. They don't have the fancy carbon accounting tools or the technical know-how to measure it. If your suppliers can't give you the numbers, you're stuck. The EU does allow you to use default values in these situations, but these are often set at a punishingly high rate, basically assuming the worst. This means you could end up paying a much higher carbon tax, not because your products are dirty, but because your supplier couldn't do the math. So, what can you do right now? Start these conversations yesterday. Don't wait for an order to come in. Send a formal request for emissions data to all your key suppliers. Ask them what systems they have for tracking embedded carbon. Their answer, or their silence, is now a huge red flag in your risk assessment. This isn't just about compliance, it's about strategy. You might need to start favoring suppliers who are ahead of the game on carbon tracking, even if they seem a little pricier up front. The long-term savings on CBAM fees could be huge. 2. The de minimis trap. Why small doesn't always mean safe. When CBAM was first announced, people rightly worried about the mountain of paperwork it would create for small businesses. So, the EU introduced a simplification, a de minimis threshold. As it stands, importers bringing in less than 50 tons of CBAM goods per year are exempt from the main obligations. The EU spun this as a big win, saying it would let nearly 90% of importers, mostly small guys, off the hook. This sounds great, and for tiny, micro exporters, it is a relief. But for a huge number of businesses, it's a dangerous trap. The problem is for businesses that are just over that 50-ton threshold. Imagine you export 60 or 70 tons of aluminum parts a year. You're not a massive corporation, but you're not a micro business either. Because you're over the limit, you face the exact same compliance nightmare as a company exporting 70,000 tons. There's no sliding scale here. You're either totally exempt or you're totally on the hook. This creates a bizarre and unfair cliff edge. A business exporting 49 tons pays nothing in compliance costs, while its competitor at 51 tons is suddenly drowning in paperwork and fees. It's a pass-fail system that ignores the massive middle ground where most small to medium businesses live. So, what can you do right now? First, audit your annual export volumes to the EU. Don't guess. Know your exact numbers for all the goods CBAM covers. If you're anywhere near that 50-ton limit, you have a major strategic decision on your hands. Do you deliberately pull back on EU exports to stay under the radar? Or do you bite the bullet and invest in a full compliance system, knowing it'll eat your margins? Some might think about splitting shipments between different importers, but be warned. Regulators are already looking for ways to stop people from gaming the system. Knowing exactly where you stand is your first move. 3. The price tag shock. How to compete when a new tax clobbers your margins. Ultimately, CBAM is designed to make carbon-heavy imports more expensive, leveling the field with EU producers who already pay into Europe's own carbon market, the Emissions Trading System, ETS. The price of these CBAM certificates is tied directly to the EU's carbon price, which has been bouncing around €75 per ton of CO2, with some analysts expecting it to top €100 by 2027. For a small exporter, that's not just a number on a screen. It's a direct hit to your ability to compete. Big corporations can often absorb these costs or use their muscle to pass them on to customers. Small businesses don't have that luxury. If your profit margin on a shipment of steel is 10%, and CBAM slaps on a 7% cost, your whole business model is suddenly on life support. This puts you at a brutal disadvantage. A larger, richer competitor who has already invested in green technology will have a lower carbon footprint and pay less in CBAM fees. Suddenly, they look a lot more attractive to EU buyers trying to keep their own costs down. CBAM forces you to compete not just on price and quality, but on carbon efficiency, a battle many small businesses are not ready for. So, what can you do right now? You need to have a very honest chat with your EU buyers. They're the ones on the ground who will be filing the paperwork and buying the certificates. Open a dialogue about the potential CBAM costs and figure out how to share the pain. Will they absorb some of the price hike? Can you lock in longer-term contracts to create some stability? At the same time, start exploring low-carbon production options. Can you switch to suppliers using recycled materials? Can you make your own factory more energy efficient? These are no longer just green investments, they're survival tactics. 4. The circumvention nightmare. When your honesty gets penalized whenever a new tax appears, someone will try to dodge it. With CBAM, the risk of cheating creates a frustrating new challenge for honest businesses. The European Commission is already scrambling to figure out how to fight it. One major concern is downstream leakage. A producer outside the EU might take a raw material covered by CBAM, like steel, do something minor to it to create a product not yet covered by CBAM, and then export that to the EU, dodging the tax. For example, turning steel sheets into a basic stamped part. This tactic undermines the entire regulation and puts honest exporters, who declare their raw materials, at a huge price disadvantage. Another landmine is the use of scrap. Under some current rules, certain scrap metals are treated as having zero emissions. This could tempt producers to mix high-carbon primary materials with scrap just to make their product's carbon footprint look smaller on paper. Global supply chains are so complex that policing these schemes is incredibly difficult, creating a crooked playing field where the rule followers get punished. So, what can you do right now? Due diligence is your best defense. You need to thoroughly vet not just your direct suppliers, but the integrity of their entire process. Demand transparency and get certifications. Document everything. If a supplier is offering you a price that seems too good to be true, it might be because they're playing games with their carbon accounting. Aligning yourself with reputable partners is more important than ever. Also, get active in your industry's trade associations. They're often the ones lobbying regulators to close these loopholes and protect honest businesses. 5. The regulatory maze. Drowning in paperwork. Even if your data is perfect, your supplier is compliant, and your price is right, you still face another massive hurdle: the sheer administrative complexity. CBAM isn't a simple tariff you just add to an invoice. It's an entirely new compliance beast. EU importers have to register as authorized CBAM declarants, which is a whole process. Then, they have to file detailed quarterly reports during this transitional phase, which ends in 2025. After that, it becomes an annual declaration. These reports need a microscopic breakdown of emissions data for every single shipment. For a small business with a lean admin team, that's a mountain of work. Many are worried they'll have to rely on larger importers just to handle it, giving up control over their own market access. And it's not just about filling out forms. It's about navigating a dense legal framework that is constantly changing. Think about the time it takes to track rule changes, understand the weird calculation methods, and make sure every declaration is perfect to avoid crippling fines. Big companies have entire departments for this. A small exporter might have one person handling all of their shipping. It's not an uneven playing field, it's a completely different sport. So, what can you do right now? Simplify everywhere you can. Start by mapping your product codes to the official CBAM categories. Look into software and consultants that specialize in CBAM reporting. Yes, it's another cost, but it could be far cheaper than the penalties for getting it wrong. Find customs brokers and logistics partners who are making it their business to become experts in this. The goal is to build your system now, during this reporting-only period, so you're not blindsided when the first payments for 2026's emissions come due in 2027. 6. The ripple effect. Getting caught in diplomatic crossfire. CBAM isn't happening in a bubble. It's a unilateral move by the EU that has a lot of its trading partners angry, viewing it as green protectionism. For a small exporter, this high-level political drama can have very real, on-the-ground consequences. When countries feel their industries are being targeted, they might retaliate. This creates a cloud of uncertainty over trade. Your shipments could face random delays at customs, new inspection rules, or other barriers as diplomatic tensions rise. Your products could get stuck in the middle of a trade dispute that has absolutely nothing to do with you. On top of that, governments outside the EU are now being pressured to create their own carbon taxes so that the money stays at home instead of going to Brussels. If your government introduces a new carbon tax in response to CBAM, you could find yourself trying to navigate two different, and possibly conflicting, sets of rules. This just adds another layer of cost and confusion. So, what can you do right now? Stay informed beyond the business news. Watch how your country's government is responding to CBAM. Trade ministries and chambers of commerce are your best friends here. They'll have updates on negotiations with the EU and changes to national policy. If you can, start diversifying your markets. Being less dependent on the EU can be a powerful hedge against the volatility of these new trade tensions. 7. The shifting goalposts. How do you plan for a future you can't see? Maybe the most stressful challenge of all is the uncertainty. CBAM is not a finished product. This transitional period, running until the end of 2025, is really just a huge data gathering project for the EU. The rules are still being tweaked, and what this all looks like long-term is anyone's guess. The European Commission is already talking about expanding CBAM to include more downstream products. This means that while your finished goods might be exempt today, in a few years, they could be pulled right into the system. The EU is also frantically developing new anti-circumvention rules, which could change reporting requirements overnight. This constant state of flux makes long-term planning incredibly difficult. How do you set a 5-year strategy when the cost of selling to your main market could change dramatically with a single regulatory update? It's hard to commit to investments or sign long-term contracts. For a small business that depends on stability, this environment is a serious threat. It's tempting to just wait and see, but that could be a costly mistake if the final rules are even tougher than expected. So, what can you do right now? Build a strategy based on flexibility, not rigid rules. Instead of trying to create the perfect, static solution, create an agile system for monitoring, reporting, and adapting. Pick someone on your team to be the CBAM captain, responsible for tracking every update from the European Commission. Run scenarios. What happens to your margins if the carbon price jumps 20%? What if your best-selling product gets added to the CBAM list? By stress testing these possibilities now, you can develop contingency plans. Your goal should be to build a business that is resilient enough to roll with the punches, because with CBAM, change is the only thing you can count on. Trying to tackle these 7 challenges can feel overwhelming, but being proactive is your biggest advantage. This transition period until the end of 2025 is your golden opportunity. It's the time to learn, prepare, and adapt before the big bills start coming due. The first step is getting a crystal clear picture of your own risk. You need to understand your data gaps, your cost exposure, and where your business is vulnerable. To help you do just that, we've put together a free CBAM readiness checklist. It's a simple tool that walks you through the key questions you should be asking about your products, your suppliers, and your processes. You can download it at the link in the description. This is a complex topic, and we'll keep you updated as the rules evolve. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and protect your business, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the future of global trade. The EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism is way more than an environmental policy. It's a fundamental rewrite of the rules of global trade. While it was designed to fight carbon leakage, it has thrown up a series of surprising and serious hurdles for small exporters. From the crushing weight of data collection and the maddening complexity of the rules, to hidden costs and the nerve-wracking uncertainty of what comes next, the path forward is definitely challenging. But it's not impossible. By understanding these 7 hidden challenges, you can shift from being reactive to being strategic. This is a moment to strengthen your supply chains, deepen your partnerships, and innovate. This isn't just about compliance. It's about building a more resilient, efficient, and future-proof business. The ground is shifting under our feet, but for those who prepare, this new landscape holds not just risks, but the opportunity to lead in a new era of trade.